People only remember strength when they fear the consequences of forgetting it. Sometimes it takes one quiet moment to reveal the deepest fractures in a community. When that moment comes, who will rise to restore what's been lost? Let us know in the comments section below and subscribe to Honor Stories That Truly Matter. Marco Capaldi didn't shuffle when he walked. He moved like a man who refused to surrender his dignity, even if his knees whispered otherwise. The soft tap of his cane on the pavement wasn't just balance, it was rhythm. A rhythm born in boot camps and battlefields, now echoing along a cracked city sidewalk lined with people too busy looking down at their phones to notice the war hero in their midst. He wore a pressed flannel shirt, sleeves rolled just once, and a pair of heavy boots that had survived more than one kind of dirt. Marco passed the same storefronts every morning. The Filipino corner market, the dry cleaners with the perpetually back-in 5 sign, and at the end of the block a small bakery with windows fogged from the rising heat of cinnamon rolls. He didn't come for the sweets. He came because this was the one place in the city where the girl behind the counter still called him "sir" and meant it. But today Marco's steps slowed near the alley that cut between a pawn shop and an abandoned barber shop. Something felt different. Not danger exactly, more like disruption. He saw them before they saw him. 3 boys, maybe 16 or 17, crouched around something. No, someone, a man on the ground, mid-40s maybe, pressing a bloodied cloth to his lip. Marco didn't hesitate. He stepped closer, his voice firm but measured. "You boys all right?" The tallest one turned first, a wiry frame wrapped in oversized streetwear, a cheap silver chain swinging from his neck. His lip curled before he even opened his mouth. "Look what we got here!" Colonel Sanders with a limp. Laughter. The other 2 joined in, one with a bright red hoodie and the other with a vape pen tucked behind his ear, like a carpenter's pencil. Marco met their eyes one by one, didn't flinch, didn't blink. That man needs help. The tall one took a step closer. "And you need to mind your business, Grandpa." Marco's jaw tensed, but he said nothing. He'd seen that look before. In recruits testing a drill instructor. In men trying to unseat authority they didn't understand. He turned to the injured man, bent slightly. "Can you stand?" Yeah, the man murmured, but his voice was weak. "They just wanted my wallet." The red hoodie kid snorted. "He offered it. Ain't our fault he's got slow hands." Marco straightened. "You boys better walk." The alley was narrow. The air between the cracked brick walls felt tighter now. The tension was the kind that hummed like the second before a shell hits. "You threatening us, old man?" asked Vapin. Marco didn't answer, just adjusted the grip on his cane. The red hoodie shoved him. Just a nudge. Testing the timber of the man. Marco staggered a step, not from the force, but from surprise. He looked back at them, not angry, not afraid, just disappointed. Then came the moment. The tall one, confident, emboldened by silence, lunged, and Marco moved. Not like a victim, not like a feeble old man. He shifted to the side, using the boy's momentum against him. One step, one pivot. The Marine in him flared alive like dry grass catching flame. The boy hit the alley wall hard and dropped to a knee, cursing. "You want to go?" Red Hoodie stepped forward now, fists clenched. "You want to go, old man?" Marco backed away slowly. "No. I want you to think about what happens next." Then Red Hoodie did the one thing Marco had feared. He spat at him. Not on him. At him. Mockery was one thing, disrespect another. But contempt? Marco Capaldi had taken bullets, buried friends, endured nights screaming alone in a VA hospital, but he'd never tasted contempt like this. Not even from the enemy. And yet, he turned, walked away. He made it 3 steps before the shove came, hard and deliberate. Marco's cane clattered against the pavement. His body swayed. Time slowed. Then came the fall. He didn't cry out, didn't grunt, just the dull sound of boots scraping pavement as his body collapsed into the street. Car horns, screech of brakes, someone shouted from the bakery window. The boys scattered, but not before one of them turned laughing and said, "Play stupid games, old man." Marco lay there, breathing steady, eyes closed. Then he opened them, slowly, and reached into the chest pocket of his flannel. Inside was a phone, not new, not cracked, and with one thumb press he made a single call. His voice didn't waver. "Briggs, it's Marco. Need a favor. Might be time." He didn't have to explain. He didn't have to say where. The voice on the other end just said, "Understood. 20 minutes." And hung up. Marco sat up, blood at the corner of his lip, his cane broken in half nearby. He looked down at it and chuckled softly. "Guess we're not done yet, are we?" Behind him, the city continued like nothing happened. But the alley remembered, and soon, so would everyone else. The old flip phone clapped shut with a soft snap, resting in Marco's palm like a worn coin passed down through generations. He held it for a beat longer, almost reverently, before slipping it back into his chest pocket. No theatrics, no anger, just purpose. A woman from the bakery ran out, apron still dusted with flour, panic in her voice. "Oh my God, Mr. Capaldi, are you okay?" Her name was Rosa, maybe in her late 30s, always cheerful, always too fast on her feet. Marco waved her off. "I've had worse landings," he muttered, reaching for the broken halves of his cane. She knelt beside him, her voice trembling now. "They just ran off. They shoved you like some sack of trash. I called 911, but—" "Don't bother," Marco said, nodding toward the alley. "The real cavalry's on its way." Rosa blinked. "You called the police?" Marco smiled, thin and knowing. "Not exactly." She didn't understand, not yet. But Rosa helped him to his feet with careful, trembling hands, and he allowed it. He hated being helped, hated the weakness that clung to him since the fall last year, the one that left him walking like a marionette, half asleep. But today wasn't about pride. Today was about timing. He took a seat on the bakery bench, brushing off his sleeves like the moment hadn't just been carved into memory. Inside the alley, a quiet stillness had returned, the kind that always came before reckoning. Across town, Staff Sergeant Tyler Briggs pushed open the glass door of the Marine Recruiting Office. It was a quiet Thursday, the kind where you finish admin early and debate getting a burrito or just a protein shake for lunch. But when he saw the caller ID flash on his phone, Marco Capaldi, he stood up like someone had pulled a pin on a grenade. Marcar never called. Not for birthdays, not for ceremonies, not even when a kid from the neighborhood joined the Corps and asked him to pin the eagle, globe, and anchor on his chest. Briggs knew what it meant. "Lopez, stay here. Lock the door if I'm not back in an hour," he told the junior staffer without looking back. What? Staff Sergeant, everything okay?" Not even a little. He was already gone before Lopez could ask another question. 15 minutes later, the first car arrived on the corner of Kessler and Vernon. Not a siren, not a badge. A black Ford Explorer with no plates and a Marine Corps sticker on the rear window. Inside were two men in polos, close-shaved, eyes scanning every angle like they were recon on patrol. Briggs stepped out, adjusting the collar of his hoodie, scanning for Marco. He found him exactly where he expected, sitting on the bakery bench like he was waiting for a bus, not justice. "You all right?" Briggs asked, his voice low, controlled. The Marine in him didn't need to shout. Marco nodded. "They didn't take anything. Not my wallet, not my pride." Briggs glanced down at the broken cane. "Looks like they tried." Marco shrugged. "They failed." Another car pulled up, this one lowered to the ground, blue with tinted windows. Out stepped Corporal Diaz, a local Marine reservist in civvies, his jaw tight, fists clenched like he was hoping the kids hadn't run too far. "You got eyes on 'em?" Briggs asked Marco. Marco didn't move, just looked toward the alley. "They're cocky." "They'll come back." "Good." Diov started to speak, but Briggs raised a hand. "Wait." They waited. Minutes passed. Then, "Like a clockwork curse," laughter echoed from the far side of the alley. The same three boys slinking back like wolves sniffing around a fresh wound. One of them, the tall one, was tossing a half-empty soda bottle from hand to hand, mocking the way Marco's cane had slipped earlier. Briggs nodded. "There they are." Diaz tensed. "Permission to speak freely." "Granted it. They picked the wrong ghost to haunt." Briggs cracked a grin. "Yeah, they just don't know it yet." The boys rounded the corner, their swagger intact, until they saw the men standing by the bakery. Uniforms weren't necessary. Something in their posture said everything. Marco stood now. Slowly. No rage, no theatrics, just presence. The red hoodie kid stopped mid-laugh. "Hey! Wait, is that—" The tall one frowned. "Yo, what is this?" Briggs took a step forward, calm, measured. "You got a name, son?" The tall one scoffed. "Who wants to know?" Briggs pointed to Marco. "He does." The boy looked confused. "Why? I didn't touch him." Marco's eyes locked with his. "You shoved me into traffic." "Wasn't traffic, just the street," the boy shot back. "Still the earth," Marco replied. "Still gravity, still wrong." The kid puffed out his chest. "We didn't know you were a vet, or whatever." "That's the problem," Briggs said. "You think respect is something people earn from you." "Yeah, well," Marco cut in. "I bled for this country before your dad even met your mom. I've seen men weep beside flag-draped coffins for brothers you'll never be worthy to carry boots for, and all I asked was a quiet walk to buy bread." The boy's bravado cracked, just a little. Then Diaz stepped forward. "We're not here to fight you." That threw them off. Briggs nodded. "We're here to invite you." "Invited?" Red Hoodie asked, skeptical. "To meet the men whose silence you just spat on." Vape pen swallowed. "What does that mean?" "It means," Briggs said, "you're coming with us. Not under arrest, but under obligation." The boys looked at each other. Marco turned away. "The decision's yours." But so is the mirror you'll have to face tomorrow." The silence hung, heavy and uncertain. And then the tall one stepped forward. Just half a step, but enough. The others followed. Briggs nodded to Marco. "Let's give them something to remember." And Marco, without a word, led them down the alley, where three more Marines waited, arms crossed, eyes sharp. But it wasn't an ambush. It was an education. And the lesson was about to begin. The alley looked different now. No longer just a shortcut littered with cigarette butts and beer cans. It had become something else. Almost sacred. The kind of place where something important was about to happen, even if you couldn't name it just yet. Marco walked ahead, his steps steadier than they should have been for a man who had just tasted pavement. But this wasn't about pain. This was about presence. The three boys trailed behind, uneasy. Their swagger had thinned to silence. The tall one kept glancing over his shoulder like maybe it wasn't too late to run. The other two weren't much better, their earlier cockiness now replaced by the quiet fidgeting of people who sensed they'd crossed a line, but didn't understand how deep it ran. As they reached the back of the alley, 4 men stood waiting. Not in formation, not in uniform, but unmistakably Marines. One of them leaned against a stack of pallets, arms folded across a barrel chest, his forearms covered in faded tattoos that read like a history book if you knew what to look for. Unit crests, dates, coordinates. Another had a limp, noticeable but controlled. A third was seated on an overturned milk crate, sharpening a pocket knife with slow, rhythmic strokes. Not a threat, just a ritual. The last, the oldest of the 4, stood with his hands behind his back, as if this were a ceremony, and in some way it was. Briggs gestured. "Boys, meet the real thing." Marco stepped aside, nodding once to the older Marine. "Master Gunnery Sergeant Harlan Tate." Tate didn't move at first, just looked each of them over, his gaze sharp as razors. Finally he spoke. "You ever been to Arlington?" The boys exchanged looks. Deshawn muttered, "That a school or something?" "No," Tate said, his voice like gravel soaked in whiskey. "It's a cemetery. The kind where the grass grows real quiet, 'cause it knows better than to interrupt." Marco stepped back beside Briggs. The alley had closed in around the moment now. No escape, no distractions. Tate took a slow step forward. "My best friend, Chavi, is buried there. Got his legs blown off clearing a minefield in Helmand so his team could cross. He bled out humming Johnny Cash. They folded the flag off his coffin and gave it to his 6-year-old daughter. You think she gives a damn how cool you look vaping behind a liquor store?" Deshawn shifted, trying to form a reply, but nothing came out. Tate kept going. "You boys think respect is some card you only hand out to people who win your approval. Let me break something to you real simple. We didn't serve for your approval. We served so you could have the freedom to be ignorant and still be safe." The kid in the red hoodie mumbled, "We didn't mean nothing. We didn't know." "That's exactly the problem," Briggs said. "You didn't know, and you didn't care to ask. You looked at an old man and saw someone you could shove. You didn't stop to ask who he was. You didn't stop to wonder what he'd been through."
Marco finally stepped forward again.
"I've watched men drown in mud with their hands still clutching a rifle. I've held the dog tags of boys younger than you who never made it out of their first tour. And yet you laugh, because I walk slow." Silence. No comeback, no smirking. Just the sound of the wind threading through the alley. Diaz, the youngest of the Marines, walked forward and pulled a box from his coat. Inside were old medals, scratched, scuffed, stories pressed into every dent. He held one up. "This is a Navy Cross. That's second only to the Medal of Honor. Marco got this pulling wounded out of a burning tank in Hue. He carried a man 3 blocks under sniper fire while his own arm was shattered. What have you done with your hands?" The question hung like a hook in the air. Vape Pen, whose name was Jaden, looked down at his palms like they had betrayed him. "We're not here to beat you," Briggs said, his voice softening now. "That would be easy. We're here to remind you of the weight of a life." Tate pointed at Marco. "You don't have to kneel, but you will apologize." Deshawn took a step forward, and for the first time his voice cracked. "I didn't know, sir. I'm sorry. I just saw an old guy. I didn't think." "That's the whole point," Marco said. "You didn't think." The other 2 boys echoed apologies, their words tangled in guilt and youth. Not performative, not perfect, but real. Then Marco did something none of them expected. He smiled. A tired, forgiving sort of smile, the kind only worn by men who had seen enough of the world to know when a heart had shifted. Marco reached into his coat and pulled out 3 envelopes, handed one to each. Inside, a single sheet of paper, the same address, the same time, Marine Corps Volunteer Night. "You want to show me you're sorry?" he asked. "Show up." They each nodded, slowly, unsure, and as they turned to leave, Deshawn looked back. Are you going to be there too?" Marco paused, then nodded. "I'll be waiting." As the boys disappeared down the alley, the Marines lingered. No celebration, no backpats. Just a nod between brothers. Tate looked at Marco. "Still teaching." Marco chuckled. "Still worth it." And behind them, the alley was quiet again. But something in the city had changed. The flyer taped to the community center door had started as a simple idea. White paper, bold black letters, honor, discipline, brotherhood, volunteer night with the U.S. Marine Corps. No fanfare, no sponsors, just a time, a place, and a chance to show up. Marco Capaldi hadn't expected a crowd. He hadn't even expected all three boys to come back, but sometimes the smallest hinge swings the biggest door. The room wasn't full, but it didn't need to be. Sean arrived first. He didn't come with friends, no hoodie this time. He wore a clean polo shirt that was a size too big and held the flyer like it was a boarding pass to a place he wasn't sure he deserved to go. Jaden showed up 10 minutes later, slouched and quiet, earbuds tucked into his hoodie pocket for once. He nodded at Deshaun, then found a seat far in the back. Red Hoodie, his real name was Terrell, was last. His mom came with him, eyes suspicious, protective, until she saw Marco sitting near the front. She recognized him, not from the alley, from the newspaper years ago, from the flag-folding ceremony at her uncle's funeral. She whispered something to Terrell and left him standing there. He stayed. Staff Sergeant Briggs took the front of the room, a stack of folders in his hand. He didn't give a speech, just said, "We appreciate those who come to listen, even more those who stay to learn." The first part of the night was simple. They talked about mentorship programs, about fitness sessions, about veterans in the neighborhood who needed help with groceries or yard work or just someone to talk to. Not punishment, not scare tactics, just presence. Purpose. Marco sat off to the side, arms folded, observing more than engaging. He didn't need to lead tonight. That wasn't the point. The point was whether the boys stayed. They did, all three. And when it came time to partner up with a veteran for community assignments, none of them hesitated. Deshaun stepped toward Master Gunnery Sergeant Tate, the man who'd stared through him like an X-ray just days earlier. "You said your friend's buried at Arlington. I'd like to hear more about him, if that's okay." Tate didn't smile, but he placed a firm hand on the boy's shoulder and said, "You got ears, don't you? Use 'em." Jaden chose Diaz. They didn't say much, just bumped fists, then sat together reviewing the schedule. Sometimes quiet was enough. Terrell approached Marco last. He didn't speak right away, just stood there. Marco looked up. "Still got that flyer?" Terrell nodded. "Taped it to my fridge." "Good, then I don't have to remind you." "Remind me of what?" Marco leaned in. "That your second chance already started. Don't waste it." Later that evening, after most of the chairs had been folded and the last pot of burnt coffee drained, Marco walked the length of the alley alone. It was darker now, but familiar, the kind of darkness he understood. He wasn't afraid of alleys. He was afraid of forgetting. He stopped where his cane had cracked on the pavement, where he'd tasted asphalt and contempt and blood in the same breath. It didn't look like a battlefield, but it had been one, and he'd won. He didn't hear the footsteps behind him until they were close, not because they were stealthy, but because his thoughts had wandered too far. It was Briggs. "Place looks different, huh?" the staff sergeant said. Marco nodded. "Quieter. You think they'll stick with it, the boys?" Marco didn't answer at first, just looked up at the brick walls, at the one rusted fire escape above them, the broken light still dangling from its socket. Then he said, "I think they know they can't go back. That's enough." Briggs rubbed the back of his neck. "City Council wants to name this alley after you." Marco chuckled. "No, thanks." "Why not?" "Name it after the ones who didn't come home." Briggs gave a small smile. "You always this stubborn?" "Only when I'm right." They stood there in silence a while. Two Marines of different wars, different decades, different wounds. A gust of wind kicked up a candy wrapper near the gutter. Marco turned to leave. Briggs stopped him. "Before you go, there's one more thing." Marco raised a brow. Briggs reached into his jacket and pulled out a wooden box. Not new, worn, like it had been passed through many hands. He handed it to Marco. Marco opened it slowly. Inside was a new cane. But not just any cane. The shaft was dark walnut, polished smooth. Near the handle, a brass inlay showed the eagle, globe, and anchor. Small, but unmistakable. Below it, engraved in old serif font, were "The man who walks with history at his side." Marco's hand tightened around it. He looked up, jaw clenched. "You had this made?" Briggs shrugged. "Few of us chipped in. Thought it was time your walk matched your legacy." Marco didn't say thank you. Didn't need to. He just walked back down the alley, this time with a new rhythm, stronger, louder, and when he reached the end, he paused. Just once, and looked back. 3 figures stood there now. Bishawn, Jaden, and Terrell. None talking, not laughing, just standing where he had fallen, watching the man who refused to stay down, the man who showed them what it meant to rise. Marco lifted the cane slightly, a nod without words, and they nodded back. Behind them, Briggs smiled and said to no one in particular, "That's what respect looks like." And in the city that had once forgotten him, the quiet old Marine became something else. Not a victim, not a headline, but a teacher. The alley that once saw shame became the place where honor walked again.